I think Greg Skedros is here, and we love you, Greg. And so I think you have some folks that supporting you here today. Anyway, we welcome you all. This is Tuesday, January 8th, 2019. We did have a work session for an hour at 6 p.m. and this is and that's also open to the public. But we have this regular session at 7 p.m. and again, appreciate all of you. We had our youth council with us for an hour who asked, I think, some pretty tough questions to the council. They asked some very, very, very astute kinds of really deliberating topics. So we appreciated it. Listen, we want to, we'll begin by having a Pledge of Allegiance, and we've asked a former mayor, John Cushing, if he would lead us. Oh, no, excuse me, Paul Summers, who is on our Power Commission. He got to choose first. And he's going to give us a Pledge of Allegiance, and then we'll ask our former mayor, John Cushing, and he'll offer a prayer for us tonight. Thank you.
Read with me the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our kind Heavenly Father, we bow our heads before Thee this evening, beginning this Bountiful City Commission meeting, Council meeting. We're grateful for this opportunity together as elected officials and staff and citizens of this great community. We appreciate the blessings and opportunities we enjoy in this fine city, and we appreciate those who service us and keep us safe and provide us services which make us comfortable and enjoy our lives here in this city. We ask Thy blessings to be with us as we meet here for a few minutes here this evening, that the business which is transacted will be appropriate and the decisions which are made will be appropriate and bless the lives of our citizens. Please help and be with those who are not able to be with us this time or otherwise incapacitated. They might be be blessed. We're grateful for the freedoms which we enjoy in this great country, and we pray that Thou would bless our leaders and those who serve us on a national and on a state, as well as our city. Now be with us this evening, we humbly pray. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, John. This is the time for that we give for public comment. This is a period of time of 10 minutes, and we allow in that 10-minute period someone to speak for up to 2 minutes, and we are happy to have you come to the podium, give your name and where you live, and the time now is yours. However, we don't wait 10 minutes. If there's no one, thanks, it'd be a long 10 minutes for us. So with that, unless there's someone's just died. Okay. Oh, good. Thank you. It's not relevant if we don't have someone come up and give us a comment.
Oh, this is serious.
Uh-oh. That was a quick 2 minutes.
We really appreciate you coming.
No worries.
Thanks.
There we go.
I just moved here, and I wanted to see
What's your name?
Oh, Scott.
Where do you live?
Off 26.
He just moved here.
I just moved here. I just wanted to figure out what politics is about, local politics, that is. So if you guys don't mind just explaining it to someone who's never done this before, has no idea what any of you do. If you have 10 minutes to sit down.
Yeah, this period of time isn't really question and answer, but we're happy to talk to you about it. But yeah, go ahead.
Garbage,
give him a
sewer, water, power. What am I missing?
Police,
Streets,
fire,
parks, streets, snow removal.
Snow removal. Somebody told me just today, why when I leave Centerville does it look completely different when I get to Bountiful? While she was cleaning my teeth, she said, I can't believe it. I live in Centerville, and as soon as I crossed, the streets are perfect in Bountiful. Well, I said, it's because we're famous for it. That's why. We're famous for it. So, hey, thank you. We appreciate you willing to get up. And really, it's a good question. Thank you. Let's approve the minutes of the previous meeting held on December 11th, 2018. Any corrections or additions? If not, I would look for a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the minutes of our last meeting.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Council reports. And Kate, we'll start with you down there. Any comments or reports from you?
I don't know that I have any, except for that I am grateful for our snow plows and the work they do based on this last storm, and I was grateful to see them out salting with our rainy slush that we had because it was icy.
Mm-hmm.
It's true.
Mayor, I'd just like to comment on that. Bountiful has a history of what's called black streets. That means we clear the snow in the winter and we get down to the asphalt, so we've got safer streets. So I think that's one of the goals of our street department, is to have black streets.
Kendall,
I don't have a report, thanks.
okay. But I will, since we have so many. Do you know how many miles of streets we have here in Bountiful? 159 miles. But we have to do not just one side of the road, but two sides of the road. So it's 318 miles. So every time that these trucks all go out and do all of our roads, they go past from 316, which is our exit here. They go down past St. George every time they do it. Pretty amazing, isn't it?
I just wanted to make a comment that I was in Ann Arbor, Michigan for the holidays and looked at the condition of the roads in Ann Arbor as compared to the condition in the roads in Bountiful. And we are fortunate and blessed that we have such a wonderful streets department that keeps our roads semi pothole free and good and usable roads, because they sure weren't in Ann Arbor. It was quite a mess during the holidays. Thank you.
Yes, and Sir Richard.
Nothing this evening. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. And Youth Council report?
No, we don't. I just want to confirm, there's no youth council members here, right? Ready to report? No.
They may still be meeting
Yes.
in the other room, but there were a lot of them here today.
Mm-hmm.
It was nice.
Thanks.
Well, the next item on the agenda is special to me because I'm not going to make too many comments. I'm going to let Greg stand up and maybe say a little bit about his life, but anybody knows the Mandarin knows Greg Skedros, and anybody that knows Greg Skedros knows of his pharmacy days as well as his Mandarin days, which are wonderful. For me, I came to Bountiful 40 years ago, not quite 40 years. In July it'll be 40 years. And Greg was one of the first persons that I met when I came, because our offices were about as close as you could get. I was at 415 Medical Drive and you were at 425 Medical Drive. And we saw each other almost every day for 25 years while I owned that laboratory. And then many times doubling it because of going to the Mandarin myself. And you're a giant in our city. We love and respect and appreciate you and your family, the trials that you've had as well as the great blessings you've had from your family. And you have a great family, and people recognize that. You leave to your daughter also a lot of responsibility, and she does it so beautifully. I'm looking right at her and pointing at her, Angel, and what she does at the Mandarin is just it's your family business, and you've made Bountiful proud. It's famous, and I think all of us, we're going to get a chance to applaud you in a minute, but would you like to say a few words, Greg? Yes. He said he wanted to, called me, so. I thought you'd at least bring some wontongs or something, Greg. I love those wontongs. They're my favorite things.
It takes 4 minutes. Is that okay?
That's perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
I timed it.
And if it takes 5, we won't ding you on the timer.
When I was born in Salt Lake City from Greek immigrant parents, my father died when I was 12 years old during the Deep Depression of the 30s. My mother was a graduate from a girls' college in Greece, gave private lessons to families in Salt Lake, which was our source of income. Both my brother and I went to work. I worked at my uncle's drugstore on 2nd South in West Temple for 8 years, which paid for my education, clothing, and accessories. Graduate from East High School in 1945, University of Utah Air Force ROTC class of 1948, and the first graduating class of the College of Pharmacy in 1950. Served during the Korean conflict at the hospital at Clark Air Force Base as pharmacy officer in the Philippines from 51 to 53. Employed at Hero Air Force Base as a civilian pharmacy officer from 55 to 61. Yes, a Bountiful restaurant for the past 57 years. Bountiful was really on my radar for 70 years when I would bring my mother, my aunt, and visit our family doctor in Bountiful, Dr. George Domeni. My late wife, Jenny, was a graduate from the University of Utah, and she did her practice teaching with Samantha Hill at Bountiful High School. Then in 1961, I was fortunate to open up my first pharmacy at the newly established Valley Shopping Center on the corner of 9th North and 4th East. After a few years of operation, the trend at that time was grocery stores were incorporating pharmacies. And I could see the handwriting on the wall that eventually we may be extinct. Safeway, Albertsons, Skaggs, Grand Central all had pharmacies. So anyway, at our location, Francesco's had a pizzeria and they left. I took over the space to put a Greek-Italian restaurant, and my Italian counterpart left and left me stranded with the space. I was fortunate in finding a Chinese couple from Vernal, Utah, and we opened up the Mandarin in 1977. Two special people came through at that time. One was John Nichols from the Coachman in Salt Lake, and he said, "You'll never make it with only a little 50-seat restaurant." So we started an expansion, and today we seat 200 people. The other person that came through was Max Mercier from La Parisienne. And I was very unhappy because I keep hearing from people things don't taste like they did last time as cooks would come and go. He says, "Listen, Greg, learn the sauces, and when these turkeys come and go, nothing changes." So with that in mind, we incorporate now 25 different sauces that we make for the restaurant, so nothing changes. And I've made tours of Chinese restaurants from the East Coast to the West, from the South through Canada, and I have to say that with the ambience of the Mandarin, the food that we serve, I think we're probably number one in America. And Richard Headley was a resident of Bountiful for many years and ended up as the president of Kiwanis in America. And he and Bob Young were in Singapore. And they asked the tour driver, he says, "We're tired of eating Malaysian food and Thai food. Where's a good place to eat Chinese food?" So the tour guide says, "Well, I'll tell you, the best place is a little town outside of Salt Lake called the Bountiful, and a restaurant called the Mandarin," if you can imagine. Anyway, and this evening tonight I have my daughter, Bettina.
Please stand.
Angel, my son-in-law Paul, and Henry, and the Skedros is here. And one thing I can say is, with Angel and Paul, they've moved the Mandarin to heights unbelievable. what they've done is unreal. Can't even figure it out how Angel managed this with no past experience. But anyway, the Mandarin's on the radar for Bountiful, Utah. Thank you.
Stay right there for a second, would you, Greg?
Okay, Randy.
Greg, we have an official letter from our city
Okay.
thanking you for how you've represented not only your family, but our community, how proud we are of you,
Well, thank you.
how happy that you're here with us to be able to receive this, and how beautiful that talk was.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Thank you very much.
You bet, Randy.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, can I just make a comment?
Oh, please.
Gregory, I just want to thank you. As a former employee of the Mandarin, I love the food, and usually after you work somewhere, you don't say that. The Mandarin is such an icon in Bountiful, and you have paid a lot of taxes. You have brought a lot of, you have hired a lot of Bountiful residents, and you have really made our city really heightened the sense of community here in Bountiful. You have done much for this city, and I am so impressed. In an interview, I heard Gregory say that what he liked most about being a pharmacist was the personal relationship where people would say, "That's my pharmacist." And then at the Mandarin, what does he do? He spends his nights going and visiting everyone at their tables. And so Gregory is in the pharmacy business and he is in the restaurant business, but really he is in the people business. And that's how I felt as an employee. He cares about his employees. He cares about the customers. He cares about people. And thank you for what you have done for our city. Thank you.
Mayor, could I make a comment?
Sure.
Gregory, a great Rotarian. 21 years ago, Mayor Cushing said, let's have a car show. And Gregory started the food court. And so that has grown into one of the premier car shows in this country. And you were part of that, and you gave us vision as far as the type of food that we should be serving at that car show. I appreciate you, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else with a...
I just want to thank
you.
Thank the Skedros family for keeping the Mandarin in Bountiful.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
May it be here always. Thank you. Also, you don't have to stay. We're going to be here till 11 and you have to stay till...
No, it's true. It's true.
No, for sure. For sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. We love your family. Oh, yeah. Hey, Greg, somebody apologized up here on the council for having some potholes in front of the Mandarin. Listen, we're going to say that publicly. We'll get those fixed. Really? We'll get those fixed. No, I mean really. Really, I mean really. Well, good. Hey, John, when you come next time, you can be in that 2-minute period. All right. Hey, thank you all again for being here. We'll consider approval of weekly expenditures of greater than $1,000, and that is for December 10th, 17th, and 24th, and I'll look for a motion.
I want to know who was here on the 24th signing checks.
Yeah.
I'd like to know that first.
All of us.
Okay.
Until noon.
Thank you. I'd be happy to make a motion that we approve the expenditures from the 10th, the 17th, and most importantly from the 24th as they
Yes.
are printed.
I'll
Second.
We'll have Kate as that second. And any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
I do have a quick question about that. I'm sorry.
Okay, please.
Gary, I was just looking at on the expenses where it says tire repair and service, and I was seeing. I'm just curious about. I'm sure that we need to buy tires, and that's understandable. But where it says tires and service, how much of those kinds of repairs do we do in-house? Do you know the answer to that?
So yes, the vast majority of our repairs are all done in-house. I think the tire and service is simply the name of the company.
Oh.
If you go over to the left-hand side, the vendor name is Purcell Tire and Service.
Okay.
But yeah, we're very proud actually of our shops. We repair everything from the string trimmers to the fire trucks for the fire district, and our mechanics, most of them, we also are we have welders. I mean, we're pretty much full service.
That's what I thought. And so for things, I was just curious, for things like oil changes, for example, is that all in-house that we do?
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, not only do we service them, but we actually manufacture parts that we need for our street snow removal and other replacement parts. They're pretty amazing. The city has saved a lot of money over the years by us doing those kinds of things in-house. So we want to consider the appointments as follows: Susan Becker and John Cushing to the Power Commission through January 15th, 2023. Councilwoman Kate Bradshaw to the South Davis Mosquito Abatement District Board through December 31st, 2019. Do we also need to consider everyone else's appointments to be continued? The appointments that we presently have, do we need to? Okay, so just, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't hurt to say it. So okay.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a comment about the Power Commission.
Please.
Just the wonderful work that Mayor Cushing and Susan Becker bring to the table. They've got varied areas of expertise, and you couldn't pay a board of directors to do a better job with. If you paid them 10 times what you're paying them right now, because you're not paying them a whole lot.
That's true, and Paul
Anyways,
as well.
And I'd like to.
And Paul as well.
Paul Summers.
Paul Summers,
Oh,
there by
hi,
you.
Paul. Yeah, but you're not getting. Actually, we're still considering whether we want to reappoint you to the. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we reappoint Susan Becker and John Cushing to the Power Commission, and that we appoint Kate Bradshaw to the Mosquito Abatement District.
I'll look for a second.
Second that.
And we'll, Richard as the second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
You lucky girl.
All right. We'll turn some time now over to Clint. Thanks, Pat.
I just have to say that if you don't reappoint him to the Power Commission, you're going to miss out on a lot of questions that come from him through David Irvine.
Wow.
Is that a threat?
Yeah. There's some inside stuff
Yeah,
for that.
for those that aren't there, David Irvine always asks questions, but he says that they come from other people. Yeah. So, okay, thank you, Mayor. This is this is also an appointment of the terms of the Historic Preservation Commission. The council has appointed members. Just to refresh your memory, our Bountiful Municipal Code requires that we have 6 members on our Bountiful Historic Preservation Commission. 2 of those are members of the council. First, the mayor who is appointed by election, and then 1 council member who is determined by the mayor and with the advice and consent of the city council. So that's council member Richard Higginson. Then we have 4 other members, April Williamson, Robert MacArthur, John Simmons, and Sandy Inman. We just need to have their terms designated. So I've got, in the staff report, you've got the chart, but basically it would be April Williamson's term would end in 2019, Robert MacArthur's term would end in 2019, John Simmons' term would end in 2021, and Sandy Inman's term would end in 2021. That's just to stagger them so we have some overlapping in experience and expertise. And with that, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
I'd be happy to make a motion that we approve those terms as designated with the appointees as written.
Second?
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Mr. Gary Hill, item number 10.
Mayor, could I make a disclaimer before we go on to number 10?
Yes?
I am the chairman of the Bountiful Veterans Committee, and I became the chairman before I became a council person. And so I just wanted to let you know that I have a vested interest in the next item that's being brought up as the chair of the Bountiful Veterans Committee. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Could I make a correction before we start that?
Please.
In the second paragraph, I would like to think that I have the power to get an item on the agenda in early January after bringing it up in early January, but I do not. The discussion that we had was in early December. So nobody moves that fast.
Correct. My apologies.
No worries.
Thank you.
So back in November, preceding this conversation, we had the opportunity in this meeting to hear from the Veterans Park Foundation. They presented a proposal here about a future Veterans Park and requested that the City Council donate some property where that could be built. Their proposal, in essence, was that through fundraising, they would pay for all of the construction of the park, and then as it was designed in conjunction with the city, it would ultimately be turned over to the city to be maintained. And at the time, there was a great proposal. Some concepts were presented to the council. Council didn't take action at that time, but in December, I heard from Council Member Higginson, and he asked that we put this back on the agenda. I think largely to be able to now formally designate some property, because the foundation can't really begin fundraising in earnest until a property is identified. And at the meeting on the 13th, there was good discussion, I think, about some of the constraints of the property, some opportunities on the property, and about timing and conditions that would make that property appropriate, or some issues that we needed to be careful of to make sure that what was built was done in a time and in a manner that everyone could be proud of, and that could be maintained in a way that would be maintained well and that we would all be proud of. And so as a result of that conversation, staff sat down with members of the Veterans Park Foundation and came up with and discussed some criteria that we would propose the council adopt in conjunction with designating the site, which would be the property directly north of City Hall here, this grassy area adjacent to the building. In the staff report, and I won't read them all verbatim, but I will highlight some of the major points that we as staff have recommended, some of which have come from the council, that we recommend you adopt in addition to at the time you designate property. First is that the work on the site not begin until all the funding has been not just pledged but received. Councilman Simonson and I sat down today and clarified too that, and this is a recommendation we'd make, that some of the items that will be donated in kind, and so that in lieu of having money in the bank, that if some of the things are donated in kind, that there be a contract in place, not just a pledge, but there be a contract in place for some of those items, so that all parties know the quantities that are expected and the time frame and any of the other conditions. We think that that's reasonable, and that in conjunction with that, that although the park could be phased, that every phase be able to stand on its own, particularly the first phase, so that the park at any given time looks complete. I think what we want to avoid is fundraising for a portion, and then we have work that's left uncompleted or something that makes the park look anything less than in a state that we'd all be proud of. The wording for that is in bullet point A. Second is that construction wait until we make sure that it doesn't conflict with the already planned construction on this building. That means it could wait until this building is done, or if we determine that there's no longer a conflict, say that we aren't staging materials or anything, that construction to begin at that point. Third, that the committee be responsible for submitting engineered drawings. Also, that any improvements in equipment must match city specifications. So, for example, that we would have the same sprinkler system here on that site that we do on the rest of the city hall site, so we aren't trying to maintain two different systems. The purpose of that is simply that to be able to maintain what's built, and that we don't end up with a maintenance problem in the future. Stipulation: the design of the park should not require the city to purchase any specialized equipment or hire additional staff. And then, of course, the city and the committee need to follow all applicable, procurement laws, and then the committee be responsible for regular updates to the city on the fundraising and any changes to the design that was the concept design that was presented on the 13th. So those would be the conditions, and we could talk more specifically if you have questions about those conditions or any others that you want to add. Those that were just discussed were, as I mentioned, were discussed with the Veterans Committee last week, and they were comfortable with those. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions and see what else we need to do.
One clarification, Gary, would there be a point at which once they could go ahead and begin that if it's not done by a certain time, whatever that is, within a year, or it could be even 2 years, that this proposal for that piece being the piece for the memorial would then be that would be terminated?
I think it makes sense to have. Maybe I can have Clint weigh in on this. It seems like any agreement should have an end date, so that there isn't something can't go on in perpetuity. So in other words, that maybe there be a timeline for fundraising by which if the funds aren't raised in a sufficient period of time, that we revisit the agreement. Is that what you're?
I am, and I think there's motivation for the committee itself and those that are there to know that it's not open-ended, that there's a period of time in there to get it done. Yes, please, Kate.
I have a series of questions, in part being new to the council and not having as much background on this issue as some of the others. I was lucky enough that I came and attended the meeting where this was presented in November, before I was appointed to the council. So I was able to sit through that meeting, but I have a number of questions that I'd like to ask, if that's okay. And I hope that no one will interpret the fact that I have these questions as not being supportive of veterans, because I think that's not the intent necessarily of the questions, but I just want to make sure I understand it. So I didn't see in the staff report a fundraising goal. What is the total that you want to raise? And that might be a question for maybe you as the chairman of the group.
Well, we have initially set that at $1,300,000. That would be for a total completion of the project. And so we wanted to... That's
$300,000 plus in-kind donations, correct?
No, that would include in-kind donations.
In-kind?
Yes, because each of the in-kind donations will have a money value. So that will be part of it. So it is not 1.3 million cash.
Good.
It's not 1.3 million cash. And then we want to be able to break it down into phases. The phase one will have a cost for phase one. That'll be determined by the architectural drawings that we have. The costs of the cement, trees, power, lawn, all of that will be put into that to come up with that initial cost for phase one.
Mm-hmm.
and then we'll submit that to the city. So basically, what we're really asking for right now is permission to have a veterans park on the north side of this building, and then have the opportunity to start to raise the funds to build it.
Has your group done a kind of a game plan analysis of how long you think it might take you to fundraise phase one as opposed to the entire phase, and do you have any pledges already on the books?
I'm not at liberty to tell you what some of the folks have told us until we have the property in line. We have been told and that once we have the property dedicated for a veterans park, then we can go ahead with the design and we can start to get the necessary in-kind funding. But I think that folks are a little reluctant to step forward until they know that we've got it.
Okay. So these were probably more directed on this side, these questions, if you don't mind.
Okay, sure.
Keep
No,
going.
no.
In the meeting that I attended in November, there were discussions about the library plans and the senior center plans from the county, and that there were some unknowns there about what was intended by those other entities with those properties. Do we have a better timeline or an idea on what they intend?
Not really. The county, we know that the county wants to remodel or rebuild the library. We know that they are considering combining that building with a senior center, and we know that they're looking primarily in Bountiful to do those things. At this point, exclusively in Bountiful. They're considering the site down by the new plaza. I don't think they've ruled out the possibility of renovating the existing library, or potentially asking the city for property on somewhere on this campus. Unfortunately, we just don't know what their timeline is. A lot of it depends on how quickly they finish the other two library projects that they're in the process of completing, which is a rebuild of the North Branch in Clearfield, or the Clearfield branch, I think they call it, and then the Syracuse branch remodel. We've asked them to give us a decision on what they want to do by about the time we adopt the budget, by May, June. Mm-hmm. Whether or not they're able to stick with that, I don't know. I'm hopeful that every indication is that they want to work with us, but no, there isn't any more specific information on that.
The other question I had is, I understand that the property that the library and the senior center sit on is included in our RDA, and is that accurate? And then if the county were to vacate those properties or sell them, what might that overlap of being in the RDA mean for what they might choose to do there, which might influence how attractive that piece of land is for a park?
It's a good question. They are in the RDA, I believe, Chad. I think we amended the RDA plan to include all of that. Yep. And then just for clarity for everybody, the property where the library sits is owned by Davis County. The property where the Golden Year Center is owned by Bountiful City. And although they own the building. Clearly, larger parcels combined together would be more desirable for redevelopment. I think whether or not that property is redeveloped is still up in the air. Early on, when the RDA was extended, this is back when the city was also considering moving the city hall, to Main Street. Part of the plan was to redevelop this area, this entire campus, with this building potentially being a hub, either housed by the University of Utah or one of the other universities or some other use. I think it's safe to say now that we've decided to renovate this building in its current location, that the cards are up in the air, and so I can't really speak to what the county may want to do. I think everything's up in the air with regards to the parcel next door and what the county wants to do with their two buildings.
So that leads me to just my final question in my series, unless I think of another.
Sure.
And that is, as I read the report and from what I remember from that other hearing in the answers today, given that there seems to be some unsettled nature to this side of the building and the property, and the goals, as I understand it, of a park that is a memorial for the living, the past, for future generations to look to, what if the nature of the other side of this property changes in the next year or two? Does that still mean that your group would want it, or if that nature changed, would it be kind of disappointing that that's where you landed when the nature of the square changed somewhat, and a different park would have provided that neat spot for remembrance, for thankfulness, for all of those things. And so I guess that's what I would wonder.
Maybe I could answer that. 2 years ago, Mayor Lewis asked us to inform the committee to look throughout the city of Bountiful to find a place where we could put a Veterans Park. And a commission of Bountiful residents were appointed, and we looked at about 8 or 10 different places throughout Bountiful where we could put a park. With the criteria being, it needs to be a reverent place, it needs to be a place very accessible to people, it needs to be a place that will be protective, where we can have access to off of Main Street, and be kind of a respectful place. So we didn't want it in a park like over at 4th North Park, because that's a play park. And we have a park across from Bountiful High School, which is beautiful and love it, and I think it's wonderful. But it's a play park. We're honoring men and women that have served this country and made it possible for us to have this country. So this park needs to be something that's very solemn, very sacred. It needs to be an area that can be visited. It needs to be a spot where family can bring their children. They can show their grandfather's name on the wall or on a monument. And it needs to be in a secure, kind of safe place. And the committee came to the conclusion that this would be the second choice. The first choice would have been if we had a new city hall downtown by Stoker. Mm-hmm. And since that was gone, this became our first choice, is to have it here. Personally, if we wait and we wait and we wait, we're losing veterans every day. By the time these brethren and sisters that have served this country will not have a chance to be honored, they'll be gone. So I say we move ahead and let's just make this park happen.
So I know that your group has worked hard, and I appreciate that. I know that you've put a lot of time and effort into trying to figure out what would be the best place and how we can honor them. And I'm sure that I speak for all of us when I say that we want to do that. We want to honor the veterans. I'm wondering if we could visit the idea of having like of having the land be available for that purpose for you, for your group, with the sunset, with a deadline of a year to revisit and see how the fundraising is coming, and then at that point to solidify, we could commit to this, but then after a year solidify and just make sure, okay, you do have the funds, you do have everything in place to give you the time that you need, and then also to revisit in a year to just confirm that everything is as you hoped, as the group wants.
Well, we had the idea of informing the city of all of our time, all of our moves. It may take us a little more than a year. But I think we need to move ahead and not have obstacles placed and restrictions placed on us that we have to accomplish this in a certain amount of time. I don't like that.
Let me make a comment here. I think, Kate, you probably heard me say at that meeting that you talked about that the county we might want to use this for county and so forth, and I've always felt like that we wanted to keep all of our options. It was shortly after that Richard sent out the idea of let's go forward and let's just do this over here. And when I thought about that, and Richard, you tell me if I'm wrong here, but my belief when I read it, and he didn't say it directly, but what he was saying when he said we should go forth and do this and make this the place was we don't want the county dictating to us anymore where we're going to have what.
Yeah, that was one of my thoughts. I think that the county has taken longer than is comfortable for me in dealing with the situation with our current library. And I think that there are ways that we can steer them or potentially steer them certain directions, or we could just run them off completely if we're not careful. But that was one of the thoughts that was behind moving forward here, is that if this piece of property, which might be on their inventory of potential sites, is removed, then maybe we narrow the field and hopefully steer them towards something that we hope that they choose in the end.
I know that that's what I'm comfortable with.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion.
Sure.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we designate the property north of the current City Hall to be the future home of the Bountiful Veterans Memorial Park, and that we do so by committing to having this property for that sole purpose, so that the Veterans Committee can begin fundraising. Also, part of the motion is that that both parties, the city and the Veterans Committee, abide by the conditions laid out in this administrative document that we've got before us, without a formalized timeline for completion, because without a formalized time frame for completion. That's the motion.
You're not comfortable with
after
they begin?
I don't think that they can begin until this building is renovated, and that's going to be a year. So to have them come back and say, well, it's been a year, what's up?
Mayor,
what if they do it after they begin?
Mayor?
Yes.
We don't have a second yet. Discussion should occur after there's a second.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
So let's have a discussion.
Any further discussion?
Yeah. So it's not that I'm saying you have to have all the money in a year or the project is off. That's not what I'm proposing. I think it's wise to have some kind of understanding about timelines, because basically, in essence, we're saying you can have the property, and then your group may or may not choose, may or may not. I was working on a project where we were fundraising for a statue at the cemetery, and it went differently than I planned. In the beginning, when I started with the fundraising, it took longer and it was different than I had envisioned. And so if you know that you have the land committed to you for a year, and you have the fundraising efforts for a year, then I think that really gives you a really good sense of what you're going to be able to do. If you can tell everyone this land has been committed to us and you have a whole year to work toward the fundraising goals, then I think it's fair to ask that we revisit the issue in a year. And I would love to see a Veterans Memorial, but there are some things that are up in the air, and I just think it would be responsible for us to have some kind of a timeline instead of completely open-ended, like maybe in 20 years you're still working on, you know what I mean? Like just some kind of sense of timeline, I think would be wise.
Could I ask a clarifying question of our city attorney? Is that appropriate in this
part
of the discussion? Would it be, Clint, possible in drafting some type of an agreement, recognizing that really for a year the land will be tied up staging for the remodel of City Hall, to structure something that allows the group to start fundraising, from the date of the agreement forward, recognizing that they can't, nothing could be done physically with the property until we were done using it for city purposes, So to require a check-in at completion of City Hall's use of the property, and then to start a clock at that point, where, a year from that point, they would be able to fundraise, which would essentially give them 2 years to fundraise, 1 year in sort of a quiet phase where the property's tied up, and then another year in maybe a more public phase where they now have access to the property. Is something like that conceivable to draft in an agreement?
Yes. It's probably not necessary, but we absolutely can do that. I think you could probably do that by just adding a condition or two to what we've already got here. If the council wants it more formalized, we can do it that way. And yeah, it's absolutely possible. I would just need a lot of direction from the council on how we draft it.
Mr. City Attorney, do you think that the document that we have before us is adequate for starting fundraising and for an agreement between the city and the Veterans Committee to be executed?
Yes, I do think it's adequate. I will say this, though. I know Councilmember Simonson doesn't want the restrictions, but just in the pure legal sense, not regardless of what the cause is, I think it's unwise to not put some sort of a time restriction. It doesn't need to be a by this time or else, but there needs to be a time restriction to where at least it can be revisited and the council has the flexibility to consider other options. It's just not wise to do that otherwise.
I think that's reasonable.
I'm not saying that I have any wisdom or insight above and beyond anybody else, but I was around when our historical folks were raising money to build a museum. And Tom, you're here. I don't know how many years that fundraising went on, but it was a while. And it was. And I think that please take this in the most gentle way that it's intended towards this wonderful project. It's possible that we also ought to be looking out to protect the city in the case that the best of fundraising intentions don't go as planned, and we end up down the road with a piece of property that's tied up without money to build a memorial. Feelings on both sides. I just don't think it's wise for us to go forward blindly. We have in this city the last 20 years that tells us you better hit benchmarks in your fundraising and you'd better have a deadline, because otherwise it just ties everybody's hands and it hurts everybody's feelings in the end, and it's just not a tenable situation. I think that it's wise if we say, what if we say something like, if fundraising falls short of what we hope it will be, the site will be revisited and a scale of a park and memorial will be found that is appropriate to what funds have been raised. Or I don't know what other language might be included.
So it just happens that as we're here, I've been working on something that might fit that. And so I'll just read it as a potential condition that the council could include. Of course, you can amend it any way you want or throw it out. But I've written here, as an additional condition, if funding adequate to complete the Veterans Park as presented to the council in November of 2018 is not received within blank, the council will consider alternate locations better suited for the amount of money amount of funding raised. Key word there for you, Council Member Simonson, is will consider. Not necessarily that it should be changed, but that the council will consider it, basically encumbering that property for whatever period you designate. After that point, the council is free to have the flexibility to determine what they want to do with the property, whether that's to maintain based on you've hit 90% of your goal, or that only 20% has been raised. This just isn't going to work out. We need to consider alternate locations with the money that has been raised.
Can I amend my motion at this time, or is there still
Yes,
discussion?
you can.
I'd like to amend my motion to add that bullet point in as read by the city attorney, with the amount of time being 18 months.
Can I offer just a comment for Councilmember Knight?
We probably need a second.
We need a second first on the motion.
I'd like to second his motion. If I can add my comment, could I reserve the right to make a second?
You can or you can make a substitute motion.
I'd like to make a substitute motion. I'd like to include the bullet point that that our city attorney drafted for us, but I'd like to make the timeline 2 years. I think there's some method to that 2-year timeline.
Oh, that's a terrible idea. Hey, that's really good. I like that. Great idea.
And I'd like to explain the method, the madness to that method. And that is, we think that we'll be exiting this building sometime in mid to late spring, and we'll be back in this building a year from then. Plus or minus construction, my husband's like, 4 trips to Home Depot and 5 hours longer than you thought rule. So we'll be back in this building in about a year. And I think that, in a lot of development and fundraising, there is this kind of quiet phase where you don't necessarily have access to the property, but you can talk about it, you can have a commitment. And then they'd have a year where they could actually show people, walk people on the property and show them the vision and have pictures or, models of what they intend. And so I think that 2-year window has some magic to it for me, in feeling like that's a good compromise and a good window to work with.
Mr. Mayor, can I?
Well, with that motion, she's made a
I think that
substitute
was a
motion. We
We
do
need a
have to
second
have a
on it.
second on the substitute motion.
Second?
Now you can have the discussion.
Any further discussion?
Are the council members who made the original motion and seconded it comfortable with that motion?
Do we have,
I would feel more comfortable if we could withdraw both motions and start over with a motion that sounds really similar to what
Well, we'd need a motion to
Councilwoman Bradshaw has brought.
Trusting in my colleague at the other end of the table, I would withdraw my motion.
Gotcha.
And I'd like to withdraw my motion, and Mr. Mayor requests to make another motion.
Absolutely.
And before you make that motion, can I just read the way it would read now based on
Please.
what I've heard? Is that
Please,
okay,
that would be helpful.
Councilmember Knight?
Please.
So add the condition, if funding adequate to complete the Veterans Park as presented to the council in November 2018 is not received within 24 months, the council will consider alternate locations better suited for the amount of funding raised.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we
Don't yet.
What?
Don't yet. I have one more question first.
Sure.
Is the council comfortable with just phase 1 funding coming through and being built? I think that needs to be part of this understanding.
No, yeah, I was not taking it that way.
Yeah.
I was taking it that we're talking about the entire
The way
amount.
that condition sounds is that if funding in full is not procured by that time, and I, for one, would be okay with just phase 1 of the
I would be
park
okay.
being built.
Part of phase 2 and phase 3 are statues,
Yes.
and they're going to get pricey. But you don't know that the statue is on the park until a statue is placed there.
Right.
So phase 1 would look like the park is completed. It's done.
And that's handled somewhat by the conditions that are in this agreement
Yes.
already.
Already, yes.
But I want to make sure that we all understand that funding that Clint is talking about may just be for phase 1.
And I'd like to see it just for phase 1.
Could I, what, of the 1.3 total?
That's an estimate.
Estimate.
Right.
But what does phase 1 look like versus the statue phases?
Well,
I'm
see,
just-
that's what we've got to finalize and put that together.
So,
But,
yeah.
but
we
all
would-
of that's going to require individuals giving their time and talents as a donation. This will be done by donation, by architects landscape architects that will donate their time to do this. And we didn't think it was fair to ask them to donate their time if this isn't going to happen.
No, I can see your point. I'm just wondering, 1.3 sounded like a lot of money to raise, and in a time where we would be kind of holding this property in isolation, waiting. And I'm just curious, maybe I get more comfortable if you've only got to raise $500,000 to finish phase 1 because the statues are the significant piece. And so that's what I'm curious about, because I haven't seen your rough estimates for phase 1 and then what's planned for phase 2. And I don't know if each statue is their own phase or how many statues.
Yeah, there will be their own phase.
The phases haven't been identified.
We haven't identified the phases yet.
So, and so that's one of the, again, legally speaking, that's one of the other, that's a concern. That's an issue. You would be agreeing to something that is not for lack of a better term, nailed down in any certain way, and so you're agreeing to nothing, really. What you could do is approve it as I just read it, which is the way I had written it was for the complete funding. I don't think anybody's going to question if you come back and reduce it down to phase one after you've seen a phase one, and just leave it at it needs to receive all funding up until that point. Council can consider it whenever they want.
And I think that this council would, in good faith, make adjustments that were beneficial to the park and memorial.
Essentially, you would be agreeing to something less than what you already had. And so that would be my advice, is in order to make this move along, is to do that. As I said, the council consider it again if they'd like, and reduce what may be required moving forward. So if in a month the group has a phase one that the council is comfortable with, that would meet the needs of what the or meet the desires and the vision of what the council has for that property, then we would just simply come back and say we're going to change that from funding adequate to complete the Veterans Park to funding adequate to complete phase one of Veterans Park.
So Clint, so would it be appropriate to add a certain time periods when they report these formally to the council where they are?
The budget phases, or the budgets per phase.
Mm-hmm.
I think what you do now is you just again to get it rolling so that there's a commitment from the city. You've got to get the entire amount of funding, knowing that the city is willing to consider less. City and staff and we can work on that. And again, whittle that down to what the council's desire and vision is for that property, what phase one would be, and we can implement all the phases at that point if we would like. This just simply gets the ball rolling where there's a commitment from the council, and it's for the full commitment, but it can always be tailored back by the council at any time.
Would you read that back one more time then? Sure. How you have?
If funding adequate to complete the Veterans Park as presented to the council in November 2018 is not received within 24 months, the council will consider alternate locations better suited for the amount of funding raised.
When does it start, the 24 months?
It would start based on your approval. It would start today.
The reason why I like that is because I know that in some ways you may feel pressed by it, but the truth is, as you said, we're losing veterans and you want to move this along. And I think that as someone who has done fundraising, when I have done fundraising, it's much more effective when you have a deadline, when you have, it's good for you, it's good for the group to have those deadlines in place. And so I really consider that a friendly aspect where you know that you want to get this moving along, and it helps encourage you to do just that. So I think it's a wise way to go.
Essentially what you've got is the council committing to a project sufficient so that fundraising can take place, with an additional commitment really that if necessary it can be considered during that 2-year period and will be considered with more definite plans. It really is kind of the best of both worlds, but we need to have concrete information that can be relied upon. And the only thing that's been presented to the council at this point is the completed all-phased project, and so that's the only thing we can base it on. Once we get something that shows what you've described, Councilmember Simonson, as basically a park where it looks like a finished product, even though there may be additional improvements still to come. Then we can tailor that back. It's a commitment from the council that. They won't make the requirements any more stringent, but they may make the requirements easier.
So, are we ready to move forward?
Can I make a comment? Can I make? Go ahead, Mark. Go ahead. You're senior than I am.
Go ahead.
I find it very interesting that I don't know how to say it politely. When it comes time to commit to doing something, members that have been in the military are very committed. I mean, they'll do it. And it just, I don't want to have the impression that our city council isn't really supportive of this by putting timelines and data lines and all of this on us that would give the impression to the community and to the veterans that maybe Bountiful City really doesn't want this park. I don't want that to come across. I want it to come across that the veterans in this city want to do this and be behind it, and the city wants to be done. So that's just my thought, is I don't want it to come across is that we are throwing things in front to slow this down, to make it more difficult, to, you know, blah, blah, blah.
I appreciate that, Mr. Simonson. Can I roll that into a motion?
Sure.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, I'd
Yes,
like
sir.
to make a motion that we dedicate the property just north of the current City Hall to be the location of the new Veterans Memorial Park. And that both the city and the Veterans Park Foundation and Committee will abide by the conditions and stipulations outlined in this document, with the addition of another condition that has been presented by the city manager in reference to funding and
City
timelines.
attorney.
Thank you.
City attorney.
Right.
City attorney, what did I say?
For a period of
24 months.
And expressing earnest hope that this does happen, and knowing that if our veterans can save the free world, they can raise money for this park.
Oh, hell yeah.
I'll be happy to second that motion.
Any further discussion?
I have a question, Councilman Knight. It's not the Veterans Memorial Park. We'd like it to be the Veterans Park.
That, I will say that's the way I read it in the additional condition, Veterans Park.
Okay.
So we got it.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks. So we've had a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I'm going to say aye because mine doesn't count, but I want it to count. Okay?
Okay.
I said it on purpose. Thanks.
Opposed?
Any opposed? That motion passes, and we're all happy. I'm really happy that this is, we want you to be happy.
Well,
We want you to be happy. Chris, you've worked very, very hard.
it's not me.
No, yes,
Could we have all the veterans out here please stand up?
or wake up.
No,
There
they're
we
awake.
go.
And if I can just add, I don't really ever add commentary, but I will just say that I think, judging by that applause, that I think the audience and the veterans here understand the legal necessity of not encumbering property in perpetuity, and understand the council's commitment to this.
100%.
So I see some nodding of heads. You're like this? Okay. You know we're for you? You know you're for, yes, okay. That's good. Thank you.
Good.
Could I make one more comment?
Please.
I want to thank the members of that committee that have worked hard. Chris, you guys have done amazing things, and the presentation that you've made and the materials that you've provided and the ideas that you've had have been stellar. So I sincerely, I have no doubt that you'll raise it. I'm excited for it to be built, and I'm sorry that there had to be legal jingo that was associated with it. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll turn some time now over to Brock.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the City Council. Appreciate your time tonight. I'll be brief. I bring before you a request to purchase the backhoe at the Bountiful Cemetery. Its current lease has come due, at least the terms have come due, and we have to make a decision on what to do with that piece of equipment. We have three options, as you can read in your report. Let the tractor go back to John Deere Financial without any further obligation, but that leaves the cemetery in a difficult situation without the proper equipment. This is the primary piece of equipment they use to accomplish their tasks over there, and it's used every day. The other option is to enter into a new lease with John Deere Financial, and the third option is to purchase it outright as is. The first option isn't great to Bountiful. The cost of equipment has tripled. The current price that we've been quoted for a new one is $105,000, and that's not been budgeted for, so that would leave us without a piece of equipment if we decided to let this tractor go back to John Deere Financial. The other option, number 2, is to enter into a lease. Right now, John Deere Financial is not offering good terms on their leases, only 3 years and 7.25% interest. So that's not favorable to Bountiful City either. So I propose tonight that we choose option 3, which is in this situation our best option, and that is to purchase the equipment outright with no further obligation to John Deere Financial. The cost of that purchase is for $47,961 and some change. That would be my recommendation, and I would entertain any questions you might have.
Is that budgeted for, by the way?
It has been budgeted for. It is in this year's capital plan.
What's the, go ahead.
No, please.
I was just wondering what the usual lifespan of a backhoe is. Does it usually last 10 years or 15 if this one's already got 5 years on it?
30.
Yeah, they can go a long time. We've had it for 5 years. We're the initial and only owner on this piece of equipment. We anticipate it going at least 20 years, given the amount of maintenance that we've done on it, and we continue to maintain our own equipment, as you've heard before. So we anticipate many more years out of this.
It was new at the start of this 5-year lease.
It was.
Other questions?
I'd be happy to make a motion that we approve the purchase of the backhoe outright at the termination of the lease for $47,961.46 as proposed.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes, Brock.
Thank you.
You have a brand new, somewhat brand new, 5-year-old backhoe that you own.
Tractor.
And Mark Slagowski, we haven't seen you for a while, so you even wore a tie. Nice.
I appreciate you hearing me. Mayor and members of the council, we went through a summer without our treatment plant, and so we ended up having to purchase some water from South Davis Water. And the price of that water ended up being about $80 an acre foot, which is really good price for water. Weaver Basin's price is about $550, so really good price. But the fact that we didn't have that plant, we found it necessary to buy 369 acre feet of water, or excuse me, 318 acre feet for a cost of $36,252.89, and would just like approval to purchase that water. We didn't anticipate this in the budget. It wasn't budgeted, but we're confident we've got enough capital money that's unspent that we'll be able to cover it.
Mark, did they teach the decimal system when you were in school?
Yes, they did.
The metric system. What would that 318 acre feet translate into in liters?
No, that's not fair.
That's not fair.
All I can tell you is
how many gallons is
an
that?
acre foot is just under 326,000 gallons.
Cool.
Wow.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move that we approve the purchase of 318 acre feet of water from South Davis Water.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes.
Mark, I
Thank
do
you.
have a quick question. I'm wondering if you could just give us a quick update on the treatment plant.
Yeah.
As of today, it's treating water.
Really?
We're not putting it in the system because we haven't jumped through the EPA and state hoops, but it's running through the plant and dumping back into the creek right now.
When do you anticipate
And
it'll be?
We've got one row of filters going. The next filters are being installed tomorrow. They'll get those going, and then the following day probably we'll install the next bank of filters. And so by Friday, the whole plant should be treating water. And then we just have to go through all the sampling processes that to prove to the state and EPA that we're treating.
How long does that usually take, Mark?
That's probably going to take about 3 weeks. It'll depend on an operating permit. If they're going to overlook a couple of small things like our operations manual isn't quite complete, but there's a couple of things that won't be done, but we're confident we'll get an operating permit.
So you're estimating like a month or so until
Yeah,
it's...
yeah, pretty safely say, don't you think, Lloyd? Within a month, we'll be putting water into the system through there.
Good.
We're really excited, and once it's done and going, we'll have Gary schedule a time for you guys to come up and see what you paid for.
We'd love to see it.
It's awesome.
So,
could we get an update on the water? Sorry to divert the attention away.
You're good.
Can we get an update on the water tank on 4th North too?
it's complete.
Really?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
we're using it. So,
Wow.
yeah, we plan on putting a booster station next to it next summer, next fall, to put water up above the temple to service all that new subdivision.
Hey, the Weaver water drilling, is that done?
It's done. It was pretty much a failure.
Oh my gosh, that's too bad.
Yeah, they're not finding much water there.
Wow, too bad.
Yeah.
So what are they going to do?
What's that?
Are they going to remediate the area or what?
Yeah, they'll probably just put it back the way it was. I haven't talked to them recently about it, but the last time I talked to them, they said we're not finding enough water to make anything worth it.
Wow. Okay, well, we'll look for a motion.
So we're ready for the next item.
Yeah, they already did that.
13.
Oh, yes. Oh, good. 13. Thank you.
With this remodel of City Hall here, as you're aware, they're looking at relocating employees from here in different areas of the city. And it's become necessary for us to house the IT department and the Human Resources Department in our building. Temporarily. We have an unfinished area in the upstairs of our building, and we're proposing to build 3 offices upstairs there. We received 2 bids. One bid for $41,500, which made us feel like maybe we'll do these offices ourselves. And then Todd negotiated a bid through JMR Construction that came in at $25,628.80. And they are willing to let us self-perform a lot of the work. So we're confident that we can get the price down below $22,000. So we're asking the council to approve a not to exceed amount of $22,000 for the construction of those 3 offices.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion?
I
All in,
I was just going to say, I like that they took the initiative to find a way to make that price tag smaller.
good stuff. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you,
Thank
Mark.
you.
Thanks, Mark.
And IT has new offices and human resources.
I thought we weren't supposed to get our IT stuff wet
I don't know. That's why they're putting it at the top.
at the top.
That's a good point.
And Lloyd.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, members of the
engineer.
council. Just for a minute, I'd like to walk you down memory lane, although it'll be new to some of you. I have some images that will represent kind of the evolution of the ice rink and the ice ribbon at the plaza. That's the item we're going to talk about. Early on in the design, well, and in the public involvement portion of the plaza, one of the items that received the most support to be included on the plaza was an ice sheet or an ice skating facility. And so this is an image of an early concept for a temporary ice sheet that could be installed and that people could enjoy. It's a little small. Let me blow it up. The previous image was actually up on the north end of the plaza. The committee, as they worked on the design of the plaza, felt like there was something missing on the south side of the plaza. And so this loop of a sidewalk was created, and this became the genesis for an area to skate on. It was actually kind of envisioned that the inner landscaped area would be the spot for a temporary sheet. Get to the next one here. You may recognize this from our previous meetings. This is the more recent concept of the ice ribbon itself, and you can see how that first concept of that circular sidewalk in this area has evolved into the ribbon that we envision occupying this space now. So this purple rectangle represents the location of the concession facility where skates would be rented, where the Zamboni would be housed, and this other rectangle over here would be where the chiller equipment would be located, kind of off-site, screened a little bit by the building to lessen some of the impact from the noise from that equipment. And then a shade structure be built here in this corner that would allow people to just watch and enjoy some heat while everyone else is enjoying the heat of skating. The next couple images I have are kind of the 3D view. This is more of a summertime view, and it's proposed that the rink or the ribbon have a summertime use of inline skating, or perhaps use of scooters or something that the community can enjoy during the remainder of the year when it's not in its full glory. Now here's kind of a wintertime scene, and you can see some fire pits over here. These would be interior to the skating ribbon for people to enjoy while they skate, so they can sit down, take a break, get their fingers and toes warmed up again, and go skate for a little while. Now this is an early rendition, and where this shade structure is shown would be the approximate location of the concession building. Thought you might enjoy those images for a moment. So based on our last discussion, and I have to apologize for an error in my memo to you, we presented an estimate for the construction of this facility of $2.27 million. So $2,270,000. And this facility would be constructed by the city and operated by the rec center, the rec district. And that agreement, as you're aware of, has been agreed to by both parties, and we're ready to move forward. So tonight's action that we're asking for your approval on is for the approval of authorizing our landscape architect to engage of the design, excuse me, and the design portion totaled up first set of numbers. That's about $155,000 to complete the actual design. And I think it's very important to note that while we build a lot of things here in the city, one of the things that we don't build is ice. And we think that it's a very wise move to engage a competent mechanical engineer, somebody who has a lot of experience building these kinds of facilities, to help guide us in the proper design and construction of this facility. This is a substantial investment, and we need to ensure that that money is spent wisely. So EPG has enlisted Van Borum and Frank as that consultant, and they will be preparing the documents which will be the basis of design for this facility, for its construction and the type of equipment to be installed so it'll operate as it should. There's a remaining $27,500 for the disciplines to help manage the construction, come out and do some field inspections, to answer questions, and basically guide the construction process. Now, this request tonight is only for the design services, and it does not represent the actual construction cost. A few weeks ago, a GMP was presented to the council for Hogan Construction to actually construct the plaza portion, and that did not include the improvements for the ice. And so we will be bringing back an additional item that will amend the guaranteed maximum price to include the improvements for the ice. But tonight we're just asking for your approval to authorize EPG to continue with the design for the ice sheet. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Lloyd, have you been on site at one of these facilities to hear how loud that equipment is that you're shielding?
Yeah, we actually went down to Harriman. Harriman's probably the closest facility physically and in construction to what we want to build. Their chiller equipment is housed in a masonry, I'm going to call it a shell because it doesn't have a roof, but it's 4 walls to direct that sound up and away from the ice sheet itself. But even standing inside that facility, it wasn't that loud.
Right.
It was relatively quiet.
I just wanted to put to bed the concerns that might arise that we're going to be shielding some 4,000 horsepower diesel generator on the ground there. The equipment's relatively quiet to start out with.
That's correct.
So,
Hogan Construction actually brought a sound meter, and they were registering between 60 and 70 decibels. So, you know, that's pretty quiet.
yeah. Thank you.
I will then look for a motion.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you.
That the City Council accept the proposal from EPG in the amount of $182,700 for the design of the ice ribbon at the downtown plaza.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Perfect. Okay. Lloyd, you're doubling up today.
I am. Thank you again. Tonight I bring before you the preliminary approval for the Joe and Bette Eggett subdivision, Phase 6. You'll all recognize this property at the top of 1800 South or Mueller Park Road, whichever you choose to call it at that point, as the llama pasture. Just by way of note, the subdivision itself, which is shown here in this red outline, does not encompass the entire parcel that the Eggetts own. The remainder parcel is attached, or will be attached, to the home on the north side of the cul-de-sac and extends down into the creek. And the Eggetts have indicated that they intend to use that as the substitute pasture for the llamas, since they'll now be homeless or otherwise displaced. The subdivision itself is fairly simple. It's a cul-de-sac, and see if we can get to the next picture here. Get to this PDF. Sorry for the...
Hey, while you're getting that, maybe John can answer this, but maybe you, Lloyd. How wide of space do you continue to have down by the creek that you still own?
It's not done.
Oh, okay. There you go. Yeah. Would you just how wide is that at the creek?
There will still be about 9 acres of property down there. So it's a couple 100 feet wide, and it runs, our property, see where the line running horizontal at the bottom goes, that continues on down to the creek also.
Okay.
There's a natural sewer easement running through there, and that's where the subdivision will go to.
That's really all I needed to know. Thanks.
Else we need to note subdivision. Although there's going to be 4 new lots, the subdivision itself is comprised of 6. It includes a lot from the previous Joe and Bette Eggett subdivision phase 5 over here in the cul-de-sac, and also lot 1 from the East Peterson subdivision. And these are both included, I'd have to verify this, but I think just to make the lot in the cul-de-sac a little bit nicer. It's a fairly small lot in relation to the other ones that are proposed. But the lot which is shown as lot 605, which is the former lot 1 of East Peterson. If you'll picture in your mind as you drive up and down that street, the home is actually located up above the street significantly. And that portion of the lot that extends down to the 1800 South right-of-way is really not usable for that owner, and has been included in this subdivision just because it makes good sense to locate the access for the cul-de-sac at that location. All of these lots meet the minimum requirements for size and for frontage. I should point out to you, it was mentioned in your staff report that the Planning Commission did grant a variance for lot 605 for the requirements of the frontage on a corner lot, since that piece gets clipped off, that narrow triangular piece gets clipped off from that lot. As far as utilities go, all the utilities are available out in 1800 South. There's a detention basin proposed down here on the low side of the development, and that will be sufficient for the storm drain requirements at this lot. Be happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Will that just be kind of like a pit with the land, or?
Yeah, the way it's proposed right now is it would be a basin. It would not. It's not proposed as a buried underground detention system.
Okay. Is there any changes or variances to move the llamas from where they have been to the other side of lot 606? It's already zoned to accept the llamas as a use?
It's just it would be a remainder parcel down there, so it's not really any different than what it was, but perhaps Chad.
Yeah, it's already considered a non-conforming use for the entire parcel. This is one big parcel. They're just making it a little bit smaller. So the llamas can stay.
And the llamas
go in all the yards and just walk around.
The llamas could go in all the yards too, I guess. Yeah, but
So we have 700 of those.
no, actually, the part that's subdivided, that non-conformity goes away. It's just for that part that's unsubdivided.
Thank you. Any other questions? If not, I'll seek a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'd be happy to report that the Planning Commission passed along a unanimous favorable recommendation on this,
It's always nice
including
to hear.
in granting the variance to lot 605 for the minimum corner lot frontage, and the owner of that lot was there as well and spoke favorably of this action. So I'd make a motion that we grant preliminary subdivision approval for the Joe and Bette Eggett subdivision phase 6, with the hope that the llamas are still visible.
Yeah, great. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The llamas are safe. Clint?
Just 1 second while I get the computer.
Didn't we just do this last year?
Yeah. So I will say to the audience that is here right now that this is required Open and Public Meetings Act training for the elected officials. It's very exciting material, but I'll just say up front, I am not offended if you all want to leave right now. Okay. We're going to talk about Utah Open and Public Meetings Act, and where I feel like I've already said plenty at this meeting. We're going to go through this quickly. For most of you, this will be a refresher. But nonetheless, it is required by law that you all take this training. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and move forward. Starting with the purpose of the Act and the Declaration of Public Policy, this is taken straight from the Utah Code. It says that the state and its agencies and political subdivisions, that's us, exist to aid in the conduct of the businesses of the people's business It is the intent of the legislature that the state, its agencies, and its political subdivisions, again us, take their actions openly and conduct their deliberations openly. So that's kind of the basic rule of thumb, is we just want to make sure that everything is conducted in the open. So what is a meeting? Utah Code defines a meeting as the convening of a public body or a specified body with a quorum present, including a workshop or an executive session, whether in person or by means of electronic communications, for the purpose of discussing, receiving comments from the public about, or acting upon a matter over which the public body or a specific body has jurisdiction or advisory power. You may ask, what is a quorum? A quorum is 3 council members, or a quorum is the mayor and 3 council members. The mayor and 2 council members can meet, but 3 council members cannot be together without it being a public meeting that needs to be noticed, and we're going to talk about the noticing requirements here in a second. What is not a meeting? I get this a lot, particularly from council members that are new, and that is a chance gathering or a social meeting. So for example, if there was going to be a summer party, employee party, to which the council would obviously be invited and welcome, that would be a social meeting. That's a social gathering. A chance gathering would be everybody got exposed to the same illness and everybody went to the same pharmacist on the same day and happened to run into each other. Because of food eaten at the employee party.
There you go.
So, those do not qualify as a meeting. It referenced electronic meetings. Electronic meetings can be held, and how that can be held is determined by the council. Certain things still apply. Notice requirements still apply. The public must have a means to attend. The electronically attending member must be able to communicate verbally or electronically so that each member of the public body is able to hear or observe the communication, and must be adopted into existing rules or by resolution or ordinance. This council has chosen to not adopt a formal policy. We have at times done that by resolution at the meeting. Okay, meetings. Utah Code does allow for public meetings to be closed, but for limited reasons. An important clarification on that is that all meetings, including closed meetings, start as an open meeting. They must start as an open meeting. Reasons for a closed meeting may be held. There are a number of things in the Utah Code. These mainly apply to cities. Some of them are they don't apply to us. They're to different state bodies. To discuss an individual's character, professional competence, or physical or mental health. To discuss security personnel, devices, or systems. Investigative proceedings regarding the allegations of criminal misconduct. Strategy sessions to discuss the purchase, exchange, lease, or sale of real property. And then a little asterisk there, public notice of the terms and approval of a sale must be in an open meeting. So these are the reasons that a meeting may be closed. If you look at our agenda tonight, we actually have on here adjourn to a closed meeting to discuss one of those options. And so that's the reason for that. Closed meetings are still recorded, and a record is kept of those meetings. There is one exception. That is the character and competency of an individual. That can be that is the only exception where there is not where the meeting is not recorded, and that is only if the mayor signs an affidavit that the only things discussed at the meeting were the character and competency of an individual. These are all common sense things. If you're talking about somebody's character or competency, there's sensitive information there that shouldn't be a public record. Security, same, we don't want to divulge security systems or procedures to the public. And negotiating to purchase or sell real estate in a public meeting gives away significant leverage that a city may have. Are there any meetings that must be closed? The answer is no. That is always discretionary. Process for closing a meeting. Again, we're going to do this here tonight. A quorum must be present. We have a quorum here tonight. The body must first hold a public meeting. We've done that before entering into a closed meeting. And the must publicly disclose the vote by name of each member for or against entering into the closed meeting. That's why we do the roll call vote. The reasons for holding the meeting, which typically is to state those exceptions that we just went through, and the location of the closed meeting. At a closed meeting, you may not approve any ordinance, resolution, rule, regulation, contract, or appointments. You may not interview or discuss a person to fill an elected position. That's why we just went through the process of filling Councilmember Bradshaw's position in an open and public meeting. And you cannot take a final action. Final votes must be open and on the record. Notice requirements for meetings. Written notice at the place where the meeting will be held is required. At least one general circulation newspaper or local media correspondent must be notified. There also must be notification to the Utah Public Notice website. These notices must be 24 hours in advance and include an agenda with all actions items stated with reasonable specificity and the date, time, and place.
Clint, I have a question.
Yeah.
The Clipper, I'm guessing, is our paper of local circulation.
That is correct.
When I was growing up, it was published a couple times a week, and now it's published once. What will we do with that requirement if the Clipper goes away? Not that I want it to.
Sure. We'll just have to use another paper of general circulation.
Would they, would the Tribune or the Deseret News accept something like that since we're
yes.
Consistent? Okay.
We were kind of thinking the Big Nickel. But that might be monthly.
Does the City Weekly count?
It's my favorite paper growing up. The Big Nickel.
Yeah, so all of the papers around here would qualify. The ones you mentioned, Standard Examiner, those would all suffice as well. Okay, notice requirements. I think I just did that one. Emergency meetings. The law does allow for emergency meetings. It's obviously for matters that are urgent. In the event that there is an emergency meeting necessary, the city is required to give the best notice practicable, and the minutes must include a statement of the unforeseen circumstances that made the meeting necessary. The best example of this, and hopefully we never have it, is a natural disaster where the city council needs to convene in order to make decisions that concern the health, safety, and welfare of the city. Meeting records. There are written minutes and recordings of public meetings that must be kept. Both the written minutes and the recordings of open meetings are public records, and those are posted on our website. Minutes must, and they can be requested. Anybody can grandma request those as well, but they're on the website. Minutes must include date, time, and place of meeting, the names of members. When I say members, we're talking about the council. Members present and absent. The substance of all matters proposed, discussed, or decided. Names and substance of information from individuals giving testimony or comments. Individual votes on each matter, and any additional information that may be requested by a member of the council. The written minutes. Pending minutes must be made available to the public within 30 days after holding the open meeting until there's a formal approval. Any pending minutes must clearly indicate that the public body has not approved the minutes and are subject to change. Here's your one shot at humor. I put it in here last year, but I'm just going to put it in here again. Our good mayor always cautions the public and the council that whatever you say is memorialized forever. So this young boy who saved his sister and looked like a hero will be memorialized forever as quoted as saying, "I wouldn't do it again. She's been a pain this week." So that one's there forever. I'm sure his sister didn't like that. I bet they all laugh at it now. It's been a while since this came out. What happens if there is a violation of the Open and Public Meetings Act? That's dictated by Utah Code, and I'm just going to read them both. Section 305 that's there. In addition to any other penalty under this chapter, a member of the public body who intentionally violates or intentionally abets or advises a violation of the closed meeting provisions of this chapter is guilty of a Class B misdemeanor. And then subsection 301, a court, not quoting directly, but just summarizing, a court can void any action in violation of the law. Sometimes a violation can be cured by discussing and taking a public vote in a subsequent meeting, and the city may have to pay court costs and attorney's fees in specific situations. Who can enforce the Open and Public Meetings Act? The courts can. The Attorney General can. a county attorney. In this, it would be the county in which you're located. So for us, it would be the Davis County attorney. And finally, a private citizen who is an aggrieved party. How long does a party have to pursue corrective action? 90 days, unless it involves bonds, notes, or debt, and then it's 30 days. Okay, my favorite quote, sunlight is the best disinfectant, with that pretty picture. That concludes our Open and Public Meetings Act training. I do have a couple more slides that I just wanted to share that coincide with Open and Public Meetings Act, and it's just ethics, and it's just a few just to go over. These are all things that we've talked about, but just to remind the council that there is a Municipal Officer and Employees Act that governs ethics. That's found in Utah Code 10-3-1302. The purpose and policy is, the purposes of this part are to establish standards of conduct for municipal officers and employees, and to require these persons to disclose actual or potential conflicts of interest between their public duties and their personal interests. So the purpose is to establish standards of conduct for municipal officers and employees to require these persons to disclose actual or potential conflicts. Basically, the Act does two things. It sets up a disclosure system for the conflicts of interest, and it describes the crimes that can be committed by that are really can only be committed by public officers or employees. So the criminal acts, basically, you cannot use your office or position to benefit yourself or others. And it focuses on economic and special privileges. So briefly, it is a crime to disclose or improperly use private, controlled, or protected information that was acquired by way of an official position. Sometimes the council receives information that would be classified as one of these under GRAMA, and that should not be disclosed. Use or attempt to use an official position to further substantially a personal economic interest or special privileges for oneself or others. An example of that, I mean, there's lots of examples, but it could be something as simple as, I could give you I would vote to approve this land use application, but me and my spouse, we really like to go on cruises. I'm just putting that out there. And then, of course, you receive a gift. It is not illegal to receive a gift. However, the law states that it should be infrequent, and the value should be less than $50. You might see that around the holidays or things like that. You can't knowingly receive, accept, take, or seek a gift of economic benefit that would tend to improperly influence a person carrying out their official duties. And last bullet point there, receive compensation for assisting another person or entity in a transaction with the city without making a written and oral disclosure to the mayor and the public. My examples that I gave a couple, for some reason I didn't update that slide, so we'll skip that one. So just quickly on disclosure, you're required to disclose if you have any interest in any business or entity that does business with the city or is regulated by the city. You must also disclose any personal interest that conflicts with your public duties. Disclosure, how do you do it? Well, you're required to file a written disclosure that's kept on file with the city, which all of you have done, and then a verbal disclosure, which we've seen an example of that by Councilmember Simonson today, disclosing his involvement with the Veterans Park. You are not required to recuse yourself. That is a key distinction that I think a lot of people misunderstand. You are not you are required to disclose. You are not required to recuse. The standard that I typically use when I receive calls from elected officials or others, appointed officials, I typically say, would this prohibit you from making a fair and impartial decision? And if the answer is yes, then you probably should recuse yourself. Again, the law does not require it. Considerations when you are considering recusing is this: how will it be viewed by the public, and how does it build the community? I think those are good rules of thumb to just look into. Is how the court of public opinion is a powerful thing, and sometimes if it has the appearance of looking improper, it may be best to recuse. When you do recuse, you're not required to do this, but I have always advised elected officials, if you do recuse yourself, then you should probably remove yourself from the room as there is a discussion taking place. And the reason I advise that is it just removes any doubt as to the fact that there may have been some sort of influence on the decision. So Again, not required, but I like to be extremely cautious with the things of that nature. That concludes our exciting tour of the Open and Public Meetings Act and the Ethics Act. Are there any questions or comments?
Can you give us a certificate?
Yes.
No, I'm serious.
Yes.
Okay. We would like, I mean, I'd like one. I have to
I already
hear
have one
about,
from John Mark.
I have to hear about 6 or 8 of these, and
Yep.
it's so nice if I have it, I can recluse myself
Yeah.
from having to hear it a whole
Yeah.
bunch of times.
Are we going to be able to get a written statement or a written certificate that we've been trained?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I just asked.
Okay, because Kate's going to need that because the Mosquito Abatement District has already conducted their training for the year, and they will,
She just
when
got
the
it.
audit comes up, they will get gigged for it if she doesn't provide them with that.
She just got it, and in addition, being a new council member, like we do with all new council members, I met with her and we talked about these things as well. So she's actually had it twice.
She's the expert at this point.
I
Yeah.
also get to sit through it several times at the legislature as
Yeah.
a citizen.
Yep. But we do it because the mayor is required to ensure that you all do it, which he has done here tonight.
Thank you, Mayor.
Hey, nice job.
And you have to do it once a year.
Good
Nice
information.
job, kids.
Thank you. Thanks, Dad.
I would move that we adjourn to an RDA meeting with a separate agenda.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thank you all for coming. You're welcome to stay for the RDA meeting.
I would also like to publicly apologize to the Crouch family for the terrible estimate of time for the start of the RDA meeting. Sorry.
Didn't I say 10 or 11 or something like that to begin with? So you're early.
As soon as we get the thumbs up from Miranda, we're ready.
Yes.
Okay.
Sweet.
Please. Oh, welcome. And all the minutes. Look for a motion to accept the minutes approved on November 13th, 2018.
So
moved.
Second?
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And I will turn the time over to you, Chad.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm going to be as brief as I can. I just wanted to show the final configuration that we've come up with the survey from the surveyor that we engaged to do this work. This is pretty close to what that parcel is going to look like that we're going to talk about tonight. Again, this discussion tonight is to finalize the terms of the purchase and sale agreement with the Crouch family for the parcel that's known as the Mabey Home. As you'll recall, and more for the benefit of the public, we did go through a proposal process a couple months ago. We received 2 proposals. The Crouch families was one of those. The RDA board did select theirs as the proposal to move forward to this negotiation stage. We have negotiated the terms of that agreement with the Crouch family, and they've agreed to those terms. I'm going to summarize those really quickly. First of all, the price did go up a little bit from what they proposed, and that's just based on a per square foot cost based on the actual legal description that we came up with. So that's the first thing that changed a little bit. $64,100, that's a rounded number, based on their per square foot rate that they proposed. I want to go through some special provisions that are going to apply to this agreement. First of all, we have agreed with the Crouch family has agreed with us that they'll agree to prohibit any kind of demolition of the structure for 15 years from the date of closing. That, of course, excludes any kind of earthquake or act of God. Purchaser also agreed that they would complete, or they agree that they'll complete the renovation of the home within 24 months of the closing. So they'll have 2 years to complete that work. We did put a provision in there that requires them to maintain that historic exterior appearance. That under 11C in that agreement, you can see that it also has some exemptions for things like routine maintenance and repair. If a rain gutter needs to be fixed or something, we're not going to require them to go through a special process. But if they do want to come in and do a major change to the building that would change the appearance, an example of that would be to take that flat roof in the back and make it a pitched roof. That's the best example I could think of. That would require your approval. So that's a provision in the agreement. We did not put any kind of fetters on what they do on the inside. They can update the inside of the building to to make it function as a modern building with two exceptions. There are a couple of items in that home that have been identified as being probably original to that home. Light fixtures, as you walk into the home, there's two original light fixtures. They're actually pretty neat. Actually, one of them is sitting on my desk right now because we cut it off to test for asbestos. So if you want to come in and take a look at it sometime, it's a pretty neat little fixture.
Wait a minute, did it pass or fail?
We have asbestos in there, but the Crouches have been made aware. Yes. Yep.
So take a look at an asbestos.
Not on the fixture. I'm sorry. The fixture doesn't have any asbestos. The home did. I understand what you're saying now. The other thing is there's a mantle in there, a fireplace mantle and surround that is likely the original. So we're not saying that they have to do anything other than those two items. They can do what they want to with the renovation. If they decide to remove those items, we've just asked that those be returned to the RDA and that we would distribute those to the Historic Society for their preservation. That's also within that 15-year period. So we, once that 15-year period is over, they'll have the ability to do with those what they want to. The last one is that if they decide they want to sell the property for whatever reason, within 15 years we have that first right of refusal to purchase that property back at the sale price, the $64,100 plus any reasonable and documented costs of improvement. So if they've made $100,000 worth of improvements to the home, we'll account for that in our purchase price as well. But they have to be documented costs of improvement to that home, not just based on an appraisal. It has to be just the documented cost of that approval. Those are the special provisions.
Can I just ask you something about that?
Yeah.
So what that means is that we would have the option to buy it. It wouldn't mean we're obligated to buy it. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah,
Okay.
we have first right of refusal. It'll come back to the board for an approval at that point, if we decide to do that. And we're not anticipating that happening, but that would be just a way to cover the fact that, your desire as a board was to preserve this building. If for whatever reason, could be anything, the Crouch family decides they don't want to go forward, we need to have the ability to purchase that back and decide what to happen with that building.
And if I could just add, typically a first right of refusal would just be, we have the right to purchase it at market value, but this is a unique circumstance where it allows us, it wouldn't be at the market value, it would be at their actual costs with include property and improvements. Otherwise, theoretically, they could, if they were really fast, they could renovate that within 6 months and put it on the market, and we'd have the first right of refusal, but we'd have to buy it at market value, and that's not the intent of this agreement.
That also has a sunset at 15 years, so each of those provisions has that same time frame. The next steps, if you choose to approve this agreement and this purchase price, the next steps would be for us to execute the agreement and to do a few other things. There's a deed restriction that's required to prevent the demolition of the home that would be recorded on the property, and the details of the closing. So with that, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them, but we are recommending that the RDA board approve this agreement for the purchase of the Mabey Home by the Crouch family.
So moved.
Second?
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. Thanks very much. I forgot a paper at my desk. One sec. All right, one last item. Two items. First one is that in front of you, you have the business development loan sheet that we provide to you at all of our meetings. This gives you an update on what's going on with some of those loans. A couple of notes. Over the holidays, Vector Computech decided to pay off their loan, so they paid that off. I want to say that was just before the
31st.
Okay, so before the end of the year. So that loan has been paid off in full. It was about almost $29,000 payoff that they did early, and so that's been taken care of. A new loan was begun, started payments. That's the Broadhead and Associates loan for $550,000. They are current. They've made their first payment. That's a $3,000 per month payment that they're making. We understand that they're getting very close to pulling that building permit. They called and asked for the building permit costs from the building official, so that's usually a sign that we're within a couple of days of picking up a permit. So that project should be moving forward. And right now, all of our loans are current. That's been that way for the last year or so, and it's been really nice. We've had times in the past where that hasn't been the case, but right now they're all current. So, and one other item, just so you know, 318 acre feet of water is approximately 393,938, 400 liters.
Thanks, Chad.
You're welcome.
Chad.
I wanted to make sure you knew that. That's based on about 3.8 liters per gallon, 326,000 gallons per acre foot.
Chad goes above and beyond.
That seems too easy.
Which means you
do it
also
in
know how many
tablespoons.
grams it is.
Yeah, Kate's asking for tablespoons.
Yeah, let's move off the metric system. Can you do it in tablespoons?
Tablespoons.
And what's the pH?
And what's the pH? Okay, that's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank
Is
you.
that-
Thank you.
Oh, one question, if I could, Mr. Chair.
Please.
The Broadhead loan that you talked about, what lot, is that the mixed-use building?
It is, Pad A, yes.
Okay, Pad
Yep,
A.
Pad A.
And it's about 26.5 billion tablespoons.
Oh, no. Oh, my God.
Wow.
Dang it, she saw me holding my phone, so I'm not actually 26,510,193,000.
It's a lot.
Wow.
All right. So with that, we'll,
We need to have a motion.
we need a motion to approve.
Just a motion to go back into
To
your
go back
city
into a
council
regular.
meeting. Yep.
Could I make a motion that we reconvene as a city council to consider a closed session?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 So now you got to make a motion to move into the
Right.
closed session, and it's by roll call vote.
I'd like to make a motion that we move to closed session to discuss the competence of each